All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And for those of you that are joining us on Zoom, I just want to give you a few housekeeping initiatives. And my name's Faye. Many of you have gotten my emails, so I'm the face to those emails. Those of you, again, that are joining us on Zoom, you can find a Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom session. That's a place for you to submit your questions for the panelists. And for those of you that are here in person, I want to first thank Monday for hosting us here and for our panelists for joining us. And for everyone, if you could just be aware, please try to not walk in front of where the camera is, because again, this is a live stream, so it would be fantastic if those of everybody that are watching us on Zoom can see that. So without further ado, I want to again thanks for coming and handing it over to Avi.
Hi, so thank you very much. I've lost my voice a bit, so I haven't been talking for the last 24 hours, which is really tough. And so I've got my voice a bit back, so please bear with me. Firstly, thank you to Monday.com for hosting us today. They've done this is their new offices that they have half the building, and this is the first outside event that they've done. So we're guinea pigs today, but we're very fortunate to be the guinea pigs. So thank you to Roy, Iran, Uriel, and Botim and the rest of the team. And today we're going to be discussing bootstrapping versus traditional fundraising, and to really walk you through a bit of the process that some of these companies go through. We have with us Eytan from Mixtiles and Ron from Empathy. Both of them are seasoned entrepreneurs. Eytan comes from a bootstrapping background, and Ron's been more traditional fundraising background for their startups. And really, we hope to learn a bit more about the options, why do one or the other, if it makes sense, and maybe all come out a bit wiser from it. So thank you again for being with us today. I really appreciate the time. And Eytan, maybe let's start and just give us a bit of a background about Mixtiles, what it does, how you started, how you came to be bootstrapped, and over to you.
So Mixtiles, we basically make photos that stick to walls without nails. This is our first product. Now we recently expanded into art. Like our original product is just custom-made photos that you have on your phone. And we're now expanding even more into interior design categories, like smart plants. And we're working on a very exciting like interior designer in your pocket app. Yeah, we have millions of customers. I mean, recently the marketer published that we made $120 million last year. We're a high growth company, and we started without external funding. We did raise money at some point, but small amounts. And I think we first got an investor inside a company when we were already doing $1.5 million a month. But we did raise money after that. So maybe just a caveat on I'm not sure we're pure bootstrappers in that regard.
So to get to $18 million run rate with no external funding, how does it happen? How do a bunch of folks come together? Where do they have the resources to start writing code, to hire people, to start marketing?
Yeah, so the first trick is to not hire people. And when we reached like $1.5 million a month, we were still 4 people, including my co-founder and David, my co-founder, and myself. And to do that, we had to be entrepreneurs for a lot of years and to kind of develop skill sets. So I was our backend developer, our app developer, build the BI, build the manufacturing systems, collaborated with David on marketing, had strategic insights on how to do companies because it was my 4th company. And David was very experienced in product, which is super important at 0 to 1 stage. Designer, he kind of figured out how to do marketing on Facebook on his own in the beginning. And that really took us so I always thought of ourselves as like a 2-people army, because we could really do a lot of different things. Our first hire was customer service, because that was too time consuming to answer emails. But by the way, amazingly informing on your product. And we really learned a lot by writing the initial customer service responses. We wrote them by the microcopy. So that was a big thing. and also having a product that we could sell from the beginning and actually do real revenue. That was also important. We were a bit lucky, I think, in the fact that we started when Instagram just started doing advertising. So there was this amazing growth. Just, you know, anyone, I guess, that started advertising on Instagram those days, like, experienced amazing growth, and we kind of were lucky in riding that trend. Yeah. Yeah, and we were able to make revenue without incurring huge losses. By the way, we did have to fund out of pocket a few hundreds of thousands of, I think $100,000, I guess, that we
So you really took your savings and you took your.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm going to coin a new word. It's called a full stack entrepreneur. So these guys were it. Ron, you come from a bit of a different view. You started a business called Gifts Project. Was your first business, right?
Well, the first one that raised any capital, that's for sure. That was a few
give
before.
us a bit of the journey.
Well, first off, I think it's magic. When you think about building a business today, and there's clearly a default. This is not east or west. It's not black or white. The vast majority of founders, for a variety of reasons, we'll probably speak about now, is raising capital. So what you just heard about a tiger team of a duo that is creating millions of dollars from their home is something that I think in 2021 you kind of only hear about in the movies. So at least I was really impressed, and congrats, Eytan, on all the ongoing success. So for us, the first company was the Gifts Project. It was a social commerce startup that was focused on group payments. And before it was acquired by eBay in 2011, we raised a relatively small amount of $1 million in venture funding. It wasn't bootstrapped in any way. It was much scrappier than some of the best practices today, but there was less capital available. And for Empathy, which is my current company, I'm the co-founder of Empathy. It's the friend you wish you had when you lose a loved one. So very non-trivial, emotional, and complicated space that we're tackling, new category in a way. We did raise capital off the bat, and I think there's a lot of considerations. The main one is that this is something that we want to build a brand for. We want to be a trustworthy brand in the US. We want to create a new category, and we want every household in the US to be made aware that there is a go-to place. And that requires a lot of building and a lot of market education that has clearly correlation with spend and investment off the bat before you can get much of it back. So I think that's specific for Empathy. But to be honest, it's not like if I would do another business, I would bootstrap. It's just a different approach. Definitely a great way to keep your runway low is not to hire people.
It works.
It's a magical. That's another one. But I basically only thrive when I'm surrounded by talented people that can show us as a team what's the next step. So capital is much needed.
And so when you think about it, how does the growth change? How do you consider how quickly you can grow, or the resources that you have available if you're, at the beginning of the journey in the first, let's call it the first 24 months of being bootstrapped versus the first 24 months of having raised a traditional seed round of financing? When you think about that, what are the kind of compromises that you're making, and how does it affect the growth of the business? Because of course, you want to raise at some stage a financing round, or you want to get the business to be self-sufficient so you can grow at a sufficient pace and a sufficient rate to be a leader or one of the top 5 or so in a market that you play in. So what are some of the considerations there?
So first of all, I have to say, when we agreed to be on this panel. Let's do the pushback thing. We coordinated before. So like I wasn't aware that it's going to be fundraising versus bootstrapping. And I don't really see myself as like a representative of any camp, I have to say. I think at the end of the day, you have your goals and then you have like the ways to get there. And you know, if you can create a Monday.com without raising funds, like, of course, do it. Like, why would you give other people equity and control and stuff? So it's all the question of if you can grow quickly and achieve your goals with or without funding.
But Eytan, was your plan?
And with Mixtiles, I have to say, like, if we're super honest about it, it was a bit of a coincidental, like accidental business. We weren't sure that it's going to be. We had a theory that the market is huge. Everybody puts photos on walls, and it's a crappy experience, and there's no startup actually trying to fix anything because everybody is like doing bots at the time, and like, you know, chasing the software world. And we were like, kind of, let's try it and see if it works. And then, you know, we got our backs, like the acceleration was so hard that we were just trying to like.
Was the plan that you would build something and then you would raise money and then you'd grow like that? And then were you overwhelmed by the demand that pushed out the need to raise the funding?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if it's a funny story, but we're kind of weird, or I'm at least a bit weird. So we're like, let's do this 3 months and then see if we want to do it 6 months and then see if we want to do it 9 months.
Okay.
And it's like kind of like if we did it 3 months, it was like growing. You know, growth is addicting. It's like one of the best drugs. I really recommend it. And then we were like, okay, let's do it 6 months. And at some point we started getting inbounds of investors. And then we were like, okay, what are we going to do with the money? Like, we're growing, we're achieving our goals, we're building what we want to build, we're optimizing our supply chain, we're like, our marketing is like improving every month, the product is improving. So we said no many times until we thought that, yeah, it could help us a bit. I have to say, in retrospective, I did learn that I think we should have raised more money earlier, because there's a switch that happens from the moment that you're like a couple of people doing stuff alone to building a company with a team and people. And you kind of want to have a lot of buffer for mistakes and being able to like run over problems. So you want to like come with much more resources than you need to also account for you being kind of stupid naturally, because you're a lot of times inexperienced with the problems you're trying to solve. Yeah, anyway, I hope I answered your question. But
so Ron, you've experienced something a bit different, because after Gifts Project, you went to work at WeWork, and WeWork was really heavily funded. And kind of when you think about your history of Gifts Project to WeWork and now to doing empathy, do you think you could build empathy if you didn't have a lot of capital? Do you think you would be able to achieve what you're trying to achieve, to change the world in this respect?
So after the Gifts Project, I did spend a few years before at eBay, PayPal, and Aleph. And what's relevant for that, before joining a very interesting ride at WeWork, was formation of brands. And it was really interesting to see that pretty much any user sector in the US has a meaningful brand equity behind it. Anything from a toothpaste to a keyboard, to headphones, to mattresses. And it's becoming a global phenomenon, but specifically in the US, there's a go-to and the top of mind for pretty much anything. And it doesn't have to be the cheapest or most expensive, but some attributes that go beyond the product. Sometimes it's a lifestyle brand, like in New York City, pretty much everywhere you look, you see a lifestyle brand. Even a coffee shop could sometimes,
Sure.
And a gym could be a lifestyle brand. And at Aleph, I got to see a few of those come to life. And by far the best example for what I would describe, not to be repeated in just my 2 cents, as a brand first play, would definitely be Lemonade. And to see that magic happening from scratch, well-funded as well, was I think a capital heavy way to do a brand first play. You need to get the logistics in place. You need to get the insurance in place. You need to put yourself out there. You need to be the outsider challenging the existing players and saying, oh, you guys are doing it wrong. WeWork was my next stop, and definitely very heavily funded with dozens of billions of dollars in funding. And obviously, there's a lot of criticism and lessons learned and pros and cons and Netflix and Apple movies and books on the way. And of course, an IPO last week.
Yep.
But more than anything else, I'm pretty sure you can't bootstrap a business like changing the workspace.
Yeah.
Because it's heavy
Capital
on
intensive.
CapEx.
Yeah.
You need to literally build buildings. And you can do it in a few different models. You can rent them, you can buy them. If you have so much CapEx, you actually need the material, then it's unlikely you can bootstrap as quickly.
Yeah.
Of course, you have examples that will contradict it. I don't think Starbucks raised venture capital at the early days. So you could, in a much longer journey, build a massive brand that has physical presence. For empathy, we're going into a very traditional industry. There is no software. This is perhaps the single largest consumer sector that is completely untouched by innovation, and specifically untouched or unspoiled by software. There's just nothing there. So we do want to move quickly. We do want to run the problem over. And we do understand we'll make a whole lot of mistakes doing it, especially when we're trying to address the very delicate balance of emotional support and practical, administrative, legal support that usually are two different brands. So just coupling those together is already a mistake that we need to figure out what's the right mix, because we think that grief is made hard by logistics, and logistics are made so much harder by grief. So we're trying to make sure we're not decoupling the two and building a brand that can address both. That requires not just marketing and brand and engineering and operations and support. It requires capital in order to do the land grabbing, in order to be there first, and hopefully be that household brand people think about when they're contemplating life transitions at the planning stage or dealing stage, because we want to meet them then and empower them. But we need to be top of mind.
I suppose it's become harder to bootstrap category defining businesses today because the internet has just made things so much more competitive and so much more transparency around it, right?
I think competition is a key word in this tension between raising capital or not.
Yeah.
You're not, when you think about the macro environment, if I won't take capital, and today the market is very unique in terms of supply and demand, then the person next to me will take that capital. And then I will not only have the disadvantage of not having the cash in hand, but also I'll be competing against someone who is in my category and running over that problem. Definitely picking that up for Maxim.
Yeah, I think, looking back about 15 years ago, I started a business called Gura, and it was a software SaaS company in governance, risk, and compliance. And it took $50,000 of capital to start this business. And the choice was, there was no choice. We just had to run it and grow it and do it profitably month on month, year on year, to build it into a business. But when we went to, much more into the US and other places, the competitors had just so much more funding. They could attract talent, they could do whatever they needed to. So we actually ended up doing the tough decision of saying, whilst we were profitable and we were doing 20 million of revenue and 15 years ago, we said, let's rather sell and not compete. So at some stage, the idea of bootstrapping does come at a cost of how you can compete and how big you can be.
What were the multiples for a SaaS company 15
No,
years
they
ago?
were like much
2x?
lower, under 10.
Little did you know. You would have
But-
waited a bit.
But it kind of goes on to another topic. When you bootstrap, you don't have the capital, as much capital, certainly in the early part. Yet you're still trying to hire the best talent. You're trying to hire good people. Can you hire and retain good people And how do options figure into it? Do they figure into it? But how do you compete against people who are well-funded? And what we're seeing today, certainly in Israel and certainly overseas, is that companies are paying an unbelievable amount of money for talent, very much driven by the big names, Apple, Amazon, Microsoft, who have the capital and who just need people to fill seats, which drives the cost up. So how when you are constrained capital-wise, whether you fund it or whether you bootstrap, in those early stages, how do you retain talent? How do you attract people and retain them?
So it all depends if you have money, right? And we did have money. So, I mean, I think we didn't feel, our challenges were never, like, since Mixtiles started, we are paying top market. We even recently, like 8 months ago, we like figured out, like, our policy of not like looking at just a job description, but for a person, we're trying to, every person that we want to hire, we just try collaboratively with them, by the way, try to understand what's the top salary they would get if they would go to like a competitor, and we would pay that. Like, so, I think we copied it from Netflix. That's their policy.
Yeah.
So in terms of salaries, that's what we did. We also have and we still have the benefit of being one of a part of a small group of big relatively big Israeli consumer companies. Yeah, you know, I have this, when we do billboards, we would do like Nimas lachem B2B2Z, like try to like B2C, like brand that. I see that it's not resonating, so I won't do that billboard. Thank you for the quick test. That was good creative testing. Yeah, so we kind of have this uniqueness of being consumer facing, and there are people that are attracted to it, that enjoy doing something that touches millions of customers, that they can tell their family about, and their family would understand what they're doing. So that's another part. And also, I think growth is a big part of it. And for us, we also had this podcast before we started Mixtiles. And I mean, I think we didn't expect the magnitude of that effect. But we had this podcast about startups in Hebrew. We were, I think, the first ones to do a podcast about startups in Hebrew. And we had 10,000 listeners per episode when for the final episodes we had. Very popular, you know, people still remember it. And even until today, it kind of has this amazing middle of the funnel effect. Like, even if people don't know it, immediately when they tell their friends that they're considering joining Mixtiles, they're, oh, it's Eytan David from the Shavua podcast, whatever. So I guess an insight from that is try to be like anybody that's trying to hire people, try to create content, I guess, that's valuable and that people read and appreciate, and that creates this goodwill, I guess, branding in a way that's deep. I'm still surprised by them. You know, we were just two guys recording something with a microphone, and still a bit surprised by the long-term effect that it has.
Well, when you think about talent acquisition and talent retention, I think it all goes back to employer value propositions. So everyone has one. It's basically what people say about you when you're not in the room. And everyone has pros and cons. Like the big tech companies, you know, they can probably be very competitive on base salaries and clarity and probability of liquidity or whatnot, but not necessarily on your impact ratio inside the organization. You'll be just a small part within the company, whatnot. So there's always something you can use to underscore when you're trying to attract talent. And I think understanding what fits your brand best is what's really going to drive talent acquisition, getting the best people to not only join forces with you, but actually stick around when things get bumpy or unclear, especially in a market like today. 10 years ago, so not even needing to go as back as the multipliers of SaaS or non-existing. So at the GIST project days, we paid 7,000 shekels for software engineers. That wasn't like decades ago, right? And our hideout on Rothschild Boulevard cost $6,500. It was a different market. Everything was completely, and Microsoft and Google never considered poaching full stack engineers that just finished the army and worked for a year or two in. There was an understanding that this is not one ecosystem, that the big tech players work differently and they're not startup-like and they can't hire from you and vice versa. You don't want to hire someone from Microsoft, for example, because they won't know what to do when you tell them to do their own QA. But today, it's obviously not the case. It's all just one big 360 journey. And you have to understand what's your employer value proposition. For me, it was pretty much always about having an authentic and deep discussion about the mission, why I want to do it, why I'm spending my time on this problem, and why I think it's going to be cool. And I think B2C is definitely a big part of that as well. If you can explain what you do at a dinner table, it's going to be much easier when you do talent acquisition. Obviously, most of the companies around us right now will disagree and are doing a great job with DevOps and RevOps and cyber and
RevOps.
There's a thing called RevOps. Yeah. And it's not saying that these are less interesting or complex problems to solve, but it's an advantage B2C companies have when they want to explain why what they're building is purposeful, why the person next to them should actually care. If there's any human emotion to it, it's just going to be much easier to build.
So changing a bit of the topic to the consideration.
We give 20 minutes, we will break, we'll change the topic.
So no, let's change the topic from HR to the fundraising side. Some of the tips or recommendations you have, given your history of fundraising, which are quite different. Some of the suggestions or ideas you have around it that you want to share. We have 70, 80 people here today and another 400 on Zoom. So I think that they'd really value understanding from an entrepreneur a bit about considerations along the journey, why, tips, tricks, etc.
I think one of the best ways to think about partnering with institutional investors specifically would be, is this person going to accelerate my ability to get new insights? Is this person going to help me validate or rule out specific directions? He or she going to have a firm yet open discussion with me and basically disagree on some of the things, which I think we didn't speak about. Governance is not the worst thing in the world. We're speaking about bootstrapping and funding as if it's an obvious advantage to have full control. But having some level of governance is actually, I find it to be a very big driver, and it adds a lot of clarity. For example, later today, I'm going to start work on my board presentation for November, where Joel and Michael and Avi and others will join. And I need to start thinking.
Oh, you're a board member?
No. Full transparency. we backed empathy.
Yeah, so we did our seed funding in August last year with General Catalyst and Aleph, and we were lucky to have Entrée join us a few months ago with our A round. And together, I think I got a group that is really challenging me, that understand this is going to take time. This is going to be a new category to build, but at the same time, why not that way? Why not this way? And can we move faster with this or that? So yes, you get more healthy pressure if you choose the right investors versus just pointless pressure if you team up with people who have pure capital but no firm opinion. So the one thing I will underscore is people that can actually accelerate your learnings and want to test things with you.
Now that I'm the second person talking, I can agree with people. So I really want to support.
I was
what
waiting for you
said.
to agree.
By the way, I also agree with Lemonade. I have so many things I agreed with, but I couldn't anyway, but really an amazing company, Lemonade, and an inspiration for me. I'm like, okay, the next company I do, I'll be like these like, can we curse here? Is that cursing? No.
I think we
Okay,
can. I
I'll
think
be
they
like
can
these,
edit it. I'll edit them out anyway.
you know, yeah, these people, those founders that, lemonade, what a good name.
Yeah.
Making lemonade from lemons.
And it's pink.
Like when you're, I mean, we're also pink, just for right. Okay, so I will just add to what you said, and that one thing I learned about investors is, look, at the end of the day, startups are a game, like, or at least you can look at it as a game. And the one of the final bosses, like the final levels, is that you IPO. And when you IPO, you kind of meet the public investor and the analysts and the Goldman Sachs of the world, blah, blah, blah. And these guys have a very different perspective on companies and what's important. And suddenly you start hearing like terms like EBITDA or whatever. And really, investors are kind of this representative of how, what's your final boss going to be like? Because investors are very affected by what's happening in the public markets. So, and they understand the public markets better than entrepreneurs, less experienced entrepreneurs. So that's just, I really agree with that. And I think it's great. I would maybe go, like, I heard your question, and what popped in my mind is maybe tactical advices, which I guess the best thing I recommend when, okay, sorry, let me just start with, when you bring an investor inside, it's kind of like marriage. Like, it's kind of like your co-founders. So you're bringing them into the kernel of the company, like ring zero. I don't know if they're like people that did cyber here, but like you're bringing them really inside. They can do a lot of harm if they are not okay. And so you really need to be smart with the due diligence process that you're doing. I think, found a method that I recommend, and our investors also said that they recommended to their people, which is find companies that failed under that these investors invested in, and ask them how was their experience. Because there's like a rule that I learned in my first company, which was also Bootstrap, by the way, which "Kshakol tov, akol tov," like when everything's good, everything's good. And it's like the stupid sentence, but it's really deep, because like when everything's good, when you're growing and you're profitable, and everybody's happy, and like if there are any problems, they're like, yeah, I don't know, but things are working. Like I'm not even going to talk about it. But when things are shitty, then you get the Aina Kuma, like people start looking at you in a weird way and starting to like doubt if you're good and if you're smart and if you're capable and blah blah blah. And then also like there's a conflict of interest. So you want to kind of simulate what happens in situations where there are conflicts of interest and where things aren't going well, and kind of create as much certainty as you can that you're bringing somebody inside that won't screw things over.
So in summary, you'd say that an investor needs to be part of the family, not a financial overseer of the business.
I'm saying that de facto they are anyway, like if you want it or not.
Yeah.
Legally they are. And so you should align with reality in that sense.
So we have about 20 minutes left or so. So maybe we want to ask some questions from the audience, and also from Zoom, if anyone wants to post on chat.
So
Anyone here on Twitter, by the way? No?
Yeah.
You should go follow me, Eytan Levit on Twitter. I'm trying to like get a community on Twitter for startups.
I'll follow.
I really recommend, like, Hebrew community on Twitter. Yeah, let's do it, guys. People.
Eytan lived to tell a Twitch shitstorm a few weeks ago.
No. Yeah,
Bravely.
for another time.
No, we're not hearing the story.
No.
Okay. So I just want to remind those of you that are watching us on Zoom here, in the bottom, there is a Q&A session or a Q&A question box that you can put your questions there. I've seen a few of you raise your hands in the Zoom. Just make sure that you are putting it in the question box so I can actually see those questions there. And then I'm going to be going around and with this microphone. So if anyone here has questions, and this is the most fun part of the event, so think of questions to ask, I'll come by and I'll give you the microphone. This microphone, as you may have noticed, doesn't work in this room. This is for the Zoom folks to be able to hear your question and then hear the answer. So we got one over here. Amazing.
I think one of the key aspects that I didn't hear about is
the type of business you're doing, how does it react to scaling? Because it's very different if you're doing a B2C app, not in your case because you have actual goods that you have to provide to people, but just a B2C app. If you're running from 100 to 1,000 to 1,000,000 users, the difference is going to be in your Azure bill and maybe a little customer support. It's very different when you're running a company that when it will grow like Monday or another SaaS for businesses or something that has to penetrate an industry like the automotive industry or health industry, then of course you're not going to be able to succeed at all if you don't have enough capital to spend. But isn't that like a defining factor of whether to bootstrap or not? Because funding has its costs, okay? It's you're not only putting someone else in the company, you have to start playing in the big field. You have to show that you're doing a lot of work. You have to show your growth over time. Doesn't it make more sense to differentiate by what business are you doing? If you're doing a nice consumer B2C app that can make millions of dollars, but still it's made by a couple of programmers and you can bootstrap for, I don't know, $200,000, $300,000 at the beginning, should I even start looking at funding? Because I don't see where the growth changes the fundamental thing, that it's just a small app in the sense of the development, and even scaling it doesn't scale it the same like in a B2B business. The question is, because you did not address it, doesn't it make a difference when you start thinking about bootstrapping or funding, the type of business you are doing in that sense? How can you compare a small B2C app, for instance, to a something like money?
So it sounds like there's an agenda in the question, not in a bad way, God forbid, but it's just in terms of there are ways to build a consumer business that has 10 people and is changing the world, and you have great examples. I think Instagram is a very romantic story in a way. You can scale a big business with no additional headcount, and WhatsApp's original team was also very nimble, etc., etc. However, again, in today's competitive market, I think it's going to be harder to do. It's still doable. You'll still find and hear stories about things like that once in a while. But if you think about other consumer brands that evolved just in the recent years, like Headspace or Calm or Casper or Equinox, some of them are OpEx heavy and some of them are CapEx heavy. Some of them, like you said, require some product and goods. Some of them are content and lifestyle. And even them, in order to compete in today's market, raised an army of content people, support people, etc., in order to run, do the land grabbing, own the market, and be the number one, number two in their category versus just another player that is, have a lifestyle business, can make a great living, and have a lot of control in their life. I'm not saying that's the way to do it, but if you think about it from the top down, the biggest brands in the world, all of them, at least I'd say 8 out of 10, if I'm guessing right now, especially in tech, used venture money, and that was then. Today's even more competitive. So you can build really meaningful companies like Mixtiles, like Iron Source, with no or little capital at the beginning. But the really, really, really huge bets in today's market are going to require a greater deal of luck if you don't use outside support. Still need luck.
But there's nothing wrong with building local or regional or national businesses. You don't have to build something that's global. It's got to do with your psychology and what you want to achieve as an entrepreneur. If you want a lifestyle business, or if you want to hit it out of the ballpark, but hitting it out of the ballpark also requires that you miss most of the strikes.
Next question. Good stuff.
No.
Hi, you keep repeating on the fact that the market is not the same, that the industry is different. And actually, I'm wondering why, because usually when you raise money, you have this urge to have talents with big names to show your investor, oh, I have this one and this one. But actually, when you think about it, that's not necessarily the people you want. You want builders. You want people that get their hands dirty and do the hard stuff. So why is the market different? I think it's the same, but
I'm not sure when he said the market is different, he talked about.
I'm talking about the people.
Having to hire rock star people to attract investors, and which, by the way, I don't think is a technique that works. Like, I wish, because we have rock star. horrible. Okay, that works.
But as a venture firm, we primarily look at the team, the founding team of the business. Because if you rely on the founding team of the business and they know what they're doing and they are rock stars or they are very competent, then you know that they will hire the right people. Now, the right people, doesn't matter if it's a plodder or a rock star. And many times the rock stars were plodders and just know how to plod like at scale. So we try not to get into hiring decisions of what our founders do. Our founders decide on the people they want to hire. We're certainly there to help them look for people, and we're certainly there to help them in terms of interviewing people and things like that. But it's their team, and they have to be comfortable with the people they bring on board. The challenge in the marketplace is that the requirement, the demand is so great for technology people that the supply is not there. And so that's made the market much tougher to recruit people and recruit good people, competent people, not rock stars, competent people.
I actually want to address the changing market. And I think for me, it's an exciting thing. I'm super proud of it. I think 10 years ago, like, you know, we're sitting in the offices of a company that today we checked, like it's worth $16 billion and it IPO'd. It's crazy, guys. Like when we started Mixtiles, I think selling a company for $150 million was like, everybody was like, yeah, guys, kudos. Now, like selling a company for 150, you're a failure. Yeah, which is also, we need to also put ourselves in perspective in all these kinds of ways. And I think the industry has grown, like so many new people have joined, like the thing called startups and high tech. Just the amount of high tech people has grown so much, and just by definition, I think it creates like inclusiveness and opens like this opportunity to so many people, creates so much wealth. And just in terms of the fundraising landscape, there's so much money. It's insane. And I know maybe some people here are now starting a startup and they're trying to raise money, and people say, you know, they're like, where's the money? Where everybody says there's a lot of money. So of course you need to like kind of be good. Anyway, you need to be good at fundraising. You know, you need to have a good startup and figure out that level of the game, of the entrepreneurship game. But still, yes, there is a lot of money because there has been such huge successes. Now VCs, like, they say, oh, this could become a Monday. So now they're comfortable at giving you $50 million or $100 million for $44 million for Series A, without you like being, now look, I approved everything to the milliliter, then unit economics and everything, just on like a great market, great team. And I think it's super exciting. We live like in exciting times. And the most exciting thing, I'll stop my preaching, is that maybe it's accelerating. Like, I'm not sure it's decelerating. Like, so we're not sure where we are at the S-curve. And yeah, and it's amazing, guys. Like, so many years there were no startup IPOs, Israeli startup IPOs. Now it's like, you know, here and there, yeah, all over the place. Like, wow, it's amazing. So I'm super excited.
And just to add to that, one of the things to consider, if you sell your startups for 30 or 40 or 50 million, it's not a failure. And for a founder, many times, having raised one round of funding and sold their startup for 40 or 60 or $80 million is a better outcome financially than a founder who sold his business or her business for 500 million, but has raised 200 or 300 million. It's just kind of, there is a dilution that you go through by raising capital. So you need to consider every time you raise capital, what it means for you and what the likely outcome will be for the business. Most businesses today are still being sold at small tens of millions of dollars rather than for the big unicorn tickets that you hear. So, you know, fundraising is dangerous as well.
I'm going to ask a quick question that we have from Zoom here. Does age matter if you are a founder in the eyes of investors? Meaning, can you be too old to be a founder? Or too young.
So I think that when you're very young, you can make errors that experience would ensure that you wouldn't make otherwise. But certainly from our perspective, we've had unbelievable success in both hiring and as well as funding young people, really into their 21, 22. So we've had a heck of a lot of success, probably disproportionate to the amount of success you have there. And at the risk of sounding PC, not PC, I think that when you get to a certain age, raising funds for a startup becomes problematic and becomes hard. And I say it because when you're 60 or 65 years old, for instance, you just haven't had the same exposure of technology in the past 5 years that people in their 20s or 30s are experiencing, both in terms of the use of it, the acceptance of it. Your immediate ring of people around you are not people who are TikToking every day. Apologize in advance to all the grannies who are TikToking, but generally you're in a different world or a different sphere, different pace in your life, and so I feel that ideally when you're in your 20s, 30s, and even into your 40s, it's kind of the best time to start a business, because if you're going to build a big business, it's going to take you 10 or 15 years, and you want to be as capable as you can be to achieve that. So, so for me, I would probably be swayed by the age of the entrepreneur. Of course, bearing in mind that we backed a business of a bunch of folks who are in their mid and late 50s who are doing additive manufacturing, which is kind of next generation 3D printing. And 3D printing is an industry that you really needed to understand 20 years ago when it was being pioneered by Stratasys and companies like that. So certain industries do favor more experienced people, and they also work at a different pace, because an additive manufacturing machine to get to market takes 5 or 7 years. That's not empathy, which you can get out in 6 months or a year and then kind of continuously improve very quickly. It's just a different ballgame.
Presidents is an industry for 70 plus people.
Not sure that works. JFK wasn't
US
70.
presidents is like 75 plus. That's like the sweet spot.
Yeah.
I'm going to do one more question from the Zoom team here before we hand it back to the audience. And this is for the bootstrappers. How much of the decision, was it really a decision to go ahead and bootstrap, or was it just a situationship that you started raising money and you're like, okay, we don't want to dilute ourselves and we'll continue bootstrapping until really successful. So how much of it was situation versus a conscious decision that you made when it came to that?
Yeah, so we did try to apply to Y Combinator and were rejected. But we did that, I guess, mostly because we respected Y Combinator and
brand.
Yeah, and we were like reading all the blogs and blah blah blah. Good times. I also have to say that at least I kind of knew that nobody's going to invest in us anyway. A consumer company doing like physical products in Israel, forget about it. It's not even worth the hassle. So we didn't even try. I always try to be honest with myself also in these situations. So I wonder if in a world where money was like a cyber company for people that, you see Mal Batasha today. So like going out of like one of the brand name cyber units in the military. So they're kind of guaranteed to raise a significant amount of money, or at least that's what they think. So I wonder if we were in that situation, we wouldn't also raise money. If I'm honest, I'm not sure. I do have to say, as the bootstrapper, hero, money is great. Capital is great. It lets you do a lot of things. Yeah, and I'm kind of just in general against black and white thinking in life. So if raising capital is easy and you see what you can do with it, so maybe it's a good decision.
Any questions from anyone here, our audience, or we'll stick with our, yep.
There's two different approaches: raise how much that you can, or raise what you need. Because the market now is it can raise capital. I can raise much more than what I need, and then what are your thoughts on that? On those two options?
So definitely, again, not a yes or no answer. Lots of consideration. The one that I think is not common enough is to remember that raising capital, specifically institutional capital, is a commitment. So when you take $100 million of cash, you basically just added $100 million of sleepless nights, of good board meetings, bad board meetings, all hands when you need to change what you're doing and rally the troops again. The good days and the bad days. It's just another $100 million of commitment. They do come at your disposal, give or take. You usually have access to that bank account and you can deploy that cash towards your goal. But you do need to return it. And you need to be honest with yourself, like, okay, this macro environment right now is going to last a week or a month or a year. Nobody really knows. But at the end of it, will you be able to grow into that valuation a year, 2, 3, 4 years later? But eventually, will you be able to even have the total addressable market or any idea how you can even grow into that? And then the usual question is, okay, do I know what to do with that capital? Can I actually put it to work or not? Who's the investor? But if we start with if the conversation would start with an understanding that capital is a commitment, I think the dialogue would just keep sane.
Yeah, I just want to add to
Agree.
First of all, I agree. Now I want to add on top, just or clarification, I guess, that yeah, when you raise $100 million, means that your valuation is, roughly speaking, 400. Then you have liquidation preferences. So it just also means that you gotta your final out the score at the end of the game is now 200, 400, 300, 400, depending on the details. But let's say now the score is at least 200 or 300 for you to see something out of it. You understand why? Because you need to also repay the money and blah, blah. So yeah, always when you hear about startups raising like tons of money, you also need to meet, it also means that they've just committed that they will kind of go 4x that amount or go home without nothing, which is horrible, I guess. Imagine like selling a company for $200 million and like having nothing out of it. It's depressing. And I've seen it happen. I've actually seen it happen.
So, you know, there's a company called DraftKings, which everyone knows probably. Big success, right? Huge in games, right? So the founders, when it was sold, saw nothing because it was sold for $500 million or so, and there was 480 million in capital raised. So that money had a preference first. We tell our founders, typically we tell people who come to see us, raise what you need and a small buffer, okay? Not anymore. Because there's a natural order of things. If you are not to succeed and your buffer doesn't help you, chances are you don't deserve it. The startup doesn't have a place. And if you do achieve what you need to, well, then you've created a lot of value. And when you've created a lot of value, then depending on your go-to-market and the run rate of your business and et cetera, you will need to raise more money, but you will be raising it off the back of success. And so the valuation is higher, you need to raise an amount of money, but because the valuation higher, because you have a success, the dilution is smaller. And so your capital stack, the amount of money you've raised is also therefore, pretty much smaller than you would have otherwise anticipated. So it improves that ratio. So don't take it lightly.
I kind of want to push back just on I love tactical advice. I'm like a sucker for like, so I do think that when you go raise money, the amount of money you want to raise is a function that the input is what you can do with the money, but also how much money you can raise. And it's kind of like, you kind of understand. So if you're now starting a cyber company, like accidentally all the cyber company is raising $30 million because that's what they need. It's not exactly that, right? It's also, I can raise 30 million. What can I do? How can I deploy it efficiently in a way? And I also learn from others. So I agree, and building on top.
That's where dilution comes into it.
Yeah.
Because if you had to raise $30 million and you had to give up 60% of your company, you'd probably go back home and not raise the $30 million.
But I think that every sector, every industry, and every geo in the world Like if you
That's
now
what
go
it's
do yeah, there's like the amount that you can raise and dilute in the standard dilution, which is 20% ballpark,
Yeah.
well, whatever, like maybe the market has changed since, I don't know,
Yeah.
but like at my time, it was 20%. So yeah, that's the number that I'm saying is the input for the function of raising money. How much money can I raise for like a reasonable dilution? Okay, that's one input. Then like, can I seriously build a Google Sheets with like a plan that actually deploys that money in a reasonable way? So yeah, I just wanted to like add that approach, which you kind of need to play the world or understand
It's a game.
the game. Yeah, it's a game.
We had many more questions on Zoom. So I just want to let all of those of you on Zoom, if you will shoot those questions to me because we're out of time, you can send it to faye@entreecapital.vc and we'll make sure to get you the right people to answer those questions. Any last things that really important questions here in the audience that we really need to be asking? Fantastic. No, so I want to give a big, huge thanks or last conversation. And thank you to everyone for joining us. There's still food, unless there's some last things that you guys want to say.
Thank you
Thank
for
you.
hosting us. It was fun.
Thank you, Eytan. Thank you, Ron. Really appreciate it. And thank
Beautiful.
you, everyone, for coming today. Thank you.